I was fat for a huge portion of my life, and it took me years of trying fad diets, cardio routines, and training programs to crack the code and figure out what it really takes to get lean and stay lean. Not only have I lost all that weight and maintained it for years, but I've helped many other men to make the same transformation without following any fad diets, cutting out carbs or sugar, doing any cardio, or cutting out their favorite foods. In this video, I'll give you the 10 things I discovered over the last decade that make fat loss quick and easy. My name is Rio, and I help busy men over 40 gain muscle, lose fat, and transform their bodies through simple, minimalist weight training and flexible dieting. So let's start by talking about what fat loss is really about, and more importantly, what it's not about, because there's a lot of bullshit in the fitness industry, a lot of people telling you complete lies when it comes to fat loss. And so the thing is, fat loss is not about cutting out your favorite foods. It's not about cutting out carbs and sugar. It's not about doing a ton of cardio. It's not about some fucking magic weight loss pill. Fat loss is about one thing and one thing only, which is eating in a calorie deficit every single day until you lose the weight that you want to lose. And I know a lot of you have shiny object syndrome, and you're probably gonna click off this video right now because that wasn't the sexy and shiny answer you were looking for. You guys will probably remain mediocre, and the people who actually internalize this and understand it and apply it will get results, because there's no secret to fat loss, right? There's no magic pill, there's no magic secret. It's about doing the basics and doing the basics well, right? Masters never don't do the basics. So if you're someone who is trying to find some like shiny new way to lose weight, you're probably not going to get results. There's a magic question that you need to ask yourself. I call this like the magic fat loss question, which is, what is the simplest, most enjoyable, and most sustainable way for me to eat in a calorie deficit every single day? That is all fat loss comes down to, all right? And so everything else we're gonna be talking about in this video just chunks up to that one thing, which is, how can I eat in a calorie deficit every single day? Because at first principle, dieting is about energy balance. You need to consume fewer calories than your body burns every single day in order to lose fat. I do not care if you're eating a completely healthy diet. I don't care if you're going for runs every single day, or you're going on the treadmill, you're doing these fancy fucking workouts. It does not matter unless you're in a calorie deficit. That is all you have to do to lose fat. And so if we break this down into two different sub buckets, we have tracking and we have adherence, right? And so these are like the two big obstacles to fat loss. And so if you can solve these two things, fat loss will become the easiest thing in the world. And these two things, like, I cannot begin to explain how fucking important these are when it comes to fat loss. This is all fat loss is. It's tracking and it's adherence. And so tracking just means, are you actually hitting the calorie number that you say you're hitting? And so if you need to hit 2,400 calories per day to lean down, are you actually hitting 2,400 calories, or are you eating way more than that? Because the number of times people will come to me saying like, Rio, I'm eating 1,800 calories, I'm eating 2,000 calories, and I'm just not losing weight. I'm like, dude, you're like 250 pounds. If you were actually hitting that calorie number, you would be losing weight rapidly. And so for most people, there is a massive discrepancy between what they think they're eating and what they're actually eating. And so literally half the battle of fat loss is just being able to track your calories accurately. And what is tracking calories? It's two basic things. It's, weighing the food that you eat and then inserting it into some sort of tracking software, or doing it manually, however you want to do it. The point is that you need to weigh the food you eat and you need to track it some way, right? And so tracking is the first big obstacle that we're going to need to tackle. The next one is adherence. And adherence just means, can you actually stick to your diet day after day? And so it's not only important to be able to stick with the diet for the duration of the time you need in order to actually lose the fat, you also need to be able to stick with it 7 days a week, right? Because a lot of people, they're perfect with their diets from Monday to Friday, then they go out on the weekend, or they sort of relax on the weekend, and then they basically offset all of the progress that they made throughout the week. And the truth is, the unfortunate truth is that fat loss has no mercy. You need to eat in a calorie deficit every single day. You cannot binge eat. If you, binge eat one day, you can offset literally 2 weeks of progress, right? And so it's important to be able to stick with your diet for the duration of the time that you need to in order to lose the weight you want to lose. And it's important to be able to stick with it day after day, 7 days a week. And the reason why most people can't stick with their diets is because they're just not sustainable, right? They're too restrictive. And so everything else that we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of the video is designed to help you conquer these two dragons, right? If you can solve tracking, you can solve adherence, you will lose weight effortlessly, and you'll be able to stay lean for the rest of your life. So the first and biggest key to solving adherence is to eat in a small calorie deficit. And so the short answer as to why that is because it's simply more sustainable. And so when I first got into weight loss, I started learning about energy balance, the importance of being in a calorie deficit. And so I figured, like, the bigger the calorie deficit I put myself in, the quicker I'll lose weight, right? And that's what I did. And that was true. I lost weight very quickly. And I ended up going from being overweight to being borderline anorexic within literally just a few months because of how aggressive I was dieting. However, there are a lot of side effects that come with putting yourself in too big of a calorie deficit. And over time, I have learned that the long road is really the fast road when it comes to fat loss. And so you want to eat in a smaller calorie deficit. And while you will lose fat a little bit slower, you will basically avoid all of the downsides of going in too big of a calorie deficit. And so when I did very aggressive cuts, what I was realizing was that I lost a lot of muscle and strength and ended up kind of just looking skinny fat at the end, which is not what you want, right? But by the time you lose the fat, like, you want to have maintained your muscle mass so that you actually look good. But when I was eating in really big calorie deficits, I would end up looking almost emaciated because of how much muscle and strength I lost, right? Because it's really hard to build and maintain strength when you're eating in such a big calorie deficit, right? And the next thing was that when I started eating in a smaller calorie deficit, I screwed up my diet way less, right? And so when you're eating in a big calorie deficit, you're gonna be fucking starving all of the time. And that's what leads to binge eating issues. That's what leads, people to, surviving from Monday to Friday and then just screwing it all up on the weekend because they go in way too big of a calorie deficit, it's not sustainable, and then they end up binge eating because of how hungry they are, right? And so by eating in a smaller calorie deficit, you're not gonna be that hungry. You're just gonna consistently and sustainably lose weight. And the other thing I noticed by going in way too aggressive of a calorie deficit was that by the time I'd reach the end of my cuts, I would rebound massively. And so if you look at bodybuilders, what do? Bodybuilders, they cut super aggressively in order to get ready for a show. And then once they finish the show, the competition, they end up ballooning back up. And that's because they force themselves they basically starve themselves down to that low body fat. And when you do that, it is borderline impossible to maintain your results afterward, right? For the purposes of maintaining muscle and strength, screwing up your diet less, and maintaining your fat loss results once you finish your diet, it is much better to eat in a smaller calorie deficit. Always remember that the long road is the fast road, okay? And so how big of a calorie deficit should you put yourself in? Well, if you have less than 20 pounds of fat to lose, I recommend putting yourself in a 300 to 400 calorie deficit. And if you have more than 20 pounds of fat to lose, then I would recommend doing a 500 to 600 calorie deficit. And the reason why you can get away with a bigger calorie deficit when you have more weight to lose is because you have a bigger energy reserve to pull from, right? And so you can actually lose weight much quicker without any of the negative side effects because you just have more body fat reserves to tap into, right? And so the way that you calculate your calories, the simple equation is to first find your maintenance calories, which is typically going to be around 15 calories per pound of body weight. And then whatever that number is, you'd simply subtract either 300 to 400 if you have less than 20 pounds of fat to lose, or you'd subtract 500 to 600 if you have more than 20 pounds of fat to lose. So the next key to solving adherence is to eat enough protein. And so ultimately the key to successful fat loss is to ensure that you stay full and that you stay satisfied while also being in a calorie deficit. And so protein is actually the most satiating of the macronutrients, and you really want to double down on it when you're trying to lose fat. And so yes, protein is very important for building and maintaining lean muscle tissue, but you actually don't need as much as the fitness industry has led you to believe. Like, the optimal protein intake for building muscle is like 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, which is not very much, right? But if you are someone with a big appetite like myself, which I assume you are if you're someone who struggles losing weight, then you're going to want to keep your protein a little bit higher. So I like to go up to 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And that's going to ensure that you stay full and satisfied while being in a calorie deficit. And so the other thing to keep in mind about protein is that it actually has thermogenic effects. And so through your body digesting protein, it actually burns calories, whereas carbs and fats don't have that same effect. So your body burns calories through digesting protein, which makes it very powerful from a fat loss standpoint. Hey, real quick, if you're a busy man over 40 struggling to find time for the gym and you need a simple time efficient, and effective training program that will deliver real results without demanding long hours in the gym every week, I created a free minimalist muscle building masterclass for you that walks you through my A to Z system that will allow you to build muscle, lose fat, and transform your body by working out just 2 times per week with minimalist training routines. You can pick it up completely free by clicking the first link in my description. So the next key to adhering to your diet plan is to consume plenty of whole foods. And so whole foods are just single ingredient healthy foods. So some examples include bananas, chicken breast, steak, eggs, nuts, broccoli, etc., right? And so the reason why you want to consume plenty of whole foods goes back to my point from earlier, which is that the key to fat loss is to be full and satiated in a calorie deficit. If you can do that, you have won the battle of fat loss, right? And a huge key to doing that is to consume lots of whole foods. And don't get me wrong, eating healthy guarantees nothing in the way of losing fat. There's so many people out there that just say, if you just eat healthy, you're gonna lose weight, you're gonna stay lean. That is not at all true. You can find so many people out there who eat completely healthy diets and are still overweight and struggle to lose weight. And that's because fat loss is all about energy balance, right? You can still gain fat if you eat healthy food if you're in a calorie surplus, right? Whereas, you can lose weight by eating purely junk food if you're in a calorie deficit, right? And so it all comes down to energy balance, but that doesn't mean that you want to just consume plenty of junk food and fit it into your calories, right? You still want to make sure that you're eating healthy food, not only to actually stay healthy, because that's one of the main reasons you get into fitness to begin with, but to make sure that you can actually sustain the calorie deficit. Because the problem with eating purely junk food is that junk food is very dense in calories and it's very low in volume, right? And so you can't eat very much junk food, which makes it not that great from a fat loss standpoint because you're not gonna get that much food. It's not gonna fill you up, right? Whereas whole foods, they're lower in calories, but they're more dense in nutrition and they're more voluminous, right? And so you can eat way more whole foods while consuming fewer calories, right? And so that makes it powerful from a fat loss standpoint. Another thing I wanted to mention is that you do not need to go overboard when it comes to eating clean, right? I highly recommend, something that's worked really well for me and my clients is following an 80-20 rule. And so what that means is that 80% of your daily calories should come from healthy, whole foods, and then you can use the last 20% to eat whatever you want, right? For me, typically, I consume my last 20% of calories in the form of a dessert or pretty much anything that I want to fit in. And the reason why it's beneficial to do that is because, once again, fat loss is all about sustainability. And so if you cut out your favorite foods, by definition, your diet is not going to be sustainable, right? And so by including a dessert or whatever you want to fit in with those last 20% of calories each day, you're actually increasing your ability to adhere to your diet, right? Because you're including foods that you enjoy, right? And so it can actually be very beneficial from an adherence standpoint to include some junk food in your diet with that last 20%. You just want to make sure that it's not taking up more than that, right? You don't want to eat 50% of your diet be junk food. You want to follow an 80-20 rule where 80% is whole foods and then 20% can come from junk or whatever else you want to fit in. So the next key to adhering to your diet plan is to eat balanced macros. And so despite what these online gurus tell you, you do not need to cut out any of the macronutrients. In fact, you should not cut out any of the macros when your goal is to get lean and be healthy, right? You need fats, you need carbs, you need protein. They all play vital roles in your bodily processes. And so what I would recommend is that you do not track your macros. That is something that has been a complete game changer for me. When it comes to fat loss and really just body composition in general, the two big hitters are going to be your calorie and protein intake. That's what you want to track. That's what you want to make sure you're hitting every single day. But beyond that, just let your carbs and fats fall where they fall. Tracking your carbs and fats is just adding extra layers of complexity for very little extra benefit, right? So just focus on tracking your calories and tracking your protein, and then ensure that you're eating a balanced diet and that you're getting carbs, you're getting fats, and you're getting protein, right? And so the reason why you don't want to cut out carbs and fats is because they're extremely important for your testosterone levels, and they're also really important for rest and sleep and fueling your training performance, and also making sure that you stay satisfied while being in a calorie deficit, right? Carbs are what's going to fuel your training performance, right? Carbs are incredibly important for being able to perform, get stronger, and build muscle in the gym, right? And fats are incredibly important for your testosterone levels, and fats will also keep you full on your diet because fats are very satiating. So the next key to solving adherence is to follow the right meal structure for you. When you eat your food actually doesn't matter. Anyone telling you like, oh, you need to eat 6 small meals per day in order to lose fat, or you need to eat 2 big meals per day in order to lose fat, it's complete bullshit. All that matters is that by the end of the day, you're in a calorie deficit, you've gotten enough protein. That's pretty much it, right? And so when you eat your food isn't going to have a significant impact on your results. If you eat 10 meals a day, that's not going to make any difference from eating 2 meals a day as long as you hit the same calorie number, right? And so you want to follow a meal structure that suits your lifestyle. And so if you're someone who likes eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then do that. If you're someone who likes to fast through the morning and just eat 2 meals, then do that. If you're someone who likes to eat small meals dispersed throughout the day, then do that. It doesn't fucking matter. What you want to make sure is that you're following something that you can sustain, right? And so I will say this, as someone with a big appetite, I would strongly recommend that if you also have a big appetite, that you save most of your calories for later in the day. The reason why that's super powerful is because if you have a big appetite, chances are you don't like eating small. Like you don't like eating small meals, right? Like personally, I can't stand eating small meals. They do nothing for me and I'm just hungry afterward, right? And so I like eating big meals. And the only way to eat big meals while having to be in a calorie deficit is to save most of them for later in the day, right? And so if you can just eat light throughout the day or even fast through the morning and save most of your calories for later in the day, you're going to have a smaller time period to consume all those calories. And so it actually gives the illusion, it gives the feel that you're eating way more than you are because you didn't eat or you didn't eat very much, at least for the first half of the day. So then you're left to consume pretty much your entire calorie intake in just the afternoon and the evening, right? And that's really, really, really powerful for fat loss because that ensures that you go to bed feeling full and satisfied because you ate most of your calories in the evening, right? And so I would strongly, strongly recommend that if you're someone with a big appetite. Try and save most of your calories for the evening, right? Just like having enough calories to eat a big dinner meal each day makes a massive, massive difference. Because personally, I don't even think that much about food throughout the day because I'm busy working, I'm busy getting things done. But when the evening comes, that's when I want to relax, that's when I want to eat more food. And if I ate throughout the day, then I wouldn't be left with very much calories to work with in the evening, right? And so by not eating very much the first half of the day, saving most of it for later in the day, it gives me this flexibility to basically enjoy myself and eat pretty big meals and be full and satisfied as a result, right? And so what I personally do in terms of meal structure is that when I wake up, I never really eat. Like I've never been hungry first thing in the morning. So what I do is I wake up, I grab some water, I grab a coffee, and then I just go about my day for the first few hours. And I'm busy getting work done. I kind of forget about food. And then once I start to get hungry, after a few hours, then I'll have my first meal. And as I said, I like to eat light. So I try and keep my first meal light, and then I'll get back to work, get busy again. And then when dinner comes around, then I'll eat a big meal, which is my big dinner meal. And then after that, I'll either have like another small meal or I'll have a dessert with that last 20% of my calories. And that's what I find to work really well. Sometimes what I do as well is I'll have like 2 light meals throughout the day, and then I'll just have like 1 big dinner meal in the evening. And that's what works for me. What I've found as well, and this is kind of separate from fat loss, but I found that eating light throughout the day is a game changer for productivity because I found that you can either be working or you can be digesting. If you're digesting, it's very unlikely that you're gonna want to work, right? So I like to keep myself feeling light and feeling empty throughout the day. That keeps me really focused on my work. And then later in the day when I'm not working as much and I just wanna relax and wind down, that's when I eat more of my food. So now we're gonna switch gears and talk about tracking. And so the first key to making sure that your calorie tracking is accurate is to simply make sure that you track everything that goes into your mouth. And so this may sound really obvious, but this is something that most people do not do. And the thing is, your calorie intake, it adds up quickly. Like the foods you eat, that all adds up really quick. And a lot of people think they have a lot of freedom when it comes to, having a snack here, using some oil there, using some sauces here. The truth is, like, you have to track all of that because it just adds up really quickly. And all those little things that you eat that you don't track, that you think don't make a big difference, can actually be the difference between you being in a calorie deficit and you being in a calorie surplus. And so it's really important to make sure that you hold yourself accountable to everything you put in your mouth. Like little things like sauces and oils, they can add up really, really quickly. And so make sure that you track every single piece of food that enters your mouth. It may sound a little bit strict, a little bit militant, but that's just how fat loss works, because if you're eating 2,500 calories per day and your maintenance is 3,000, you might think like that 500 calorie difference is like a big, like that's a lot of food. But if you actually, take some food and you measure out like what 500 calories is, it's not very much. And it's very easy to underestimate how much you're eating, okay? The next one is uniform eating. And so this is actually the biggest game changer for making calorie tracking easy and making it accurate. And so uniform eating just means eating very similarly throughout the week. It means eating the same handful of meals throughout the week and keeping your meals simple and limiting their variety. Uniform eating is simply just a way to reduce the variety of your diet, because in all honesty, variety is not the spice of life when it comes to nutrition. And so the reason why it's really powerful from a tracking standpoint to eat similar meals throughout the week is because you become very familiar with those meals. And so if you're eating different meals every single day, you're constantly having to track those meals because it's new to you. You don't know what the meal is made up of. You haven't tracked the foods, you haven't tracked the meals. And it makes it so that you're having to be a bit more meticulous with the calorie tracking. Whereas if you eat very similarly throughout the week, you kind of know what the meals that you eat contain in terms of calories. And that eliminates the need for you to constantly have to weigh things out. And so it allows you to take your foot off the gas a little bit while still being accurate. So it's very powerful from a lifestyle standpoint and for eliminating decision fatigue, right? There's a reason why the wealthiest people in the world often wear the same clothes every single day, right? It's because they know that that is extra decision fatigue that they have to deal with, right? Because they know that willpower is one reserve. It's not like you don't have a different reserve for each different area of your life. Like we only have a finite amount of willpower each day, and all of this little shit pulls from that willpower reserve, right? And I don't know about you, but I'd rather save my willpower and allocate it to more important areas of my life, right? And so uniform eating is just a way to streamline and simplify your dieting. And so the reason why you want to keep the meals simple is because the more ingredients you use, the more your tracking is bound to be off, because there's just too many different variables to keep track of. And so if you can eat similar meals each day and you can keep those meals simple, it's gonna make tracking way easier and it's gonna make it much more accurate. The more variables you have, the more meticulous you have to be with your calorie tracking. And if you're someone who is okay with having to pull out the scale every single time you eat because you're trying new meals, you're making these fancy recipes, that's fine. Just realize that you'll have to be more meticulous with the calorie tracking. Whereas if you keep things simpler, you can be a little bit less meticulous, take your foot off the gas a little bit. So now let's talk about cardio. And so most people in the fitness industry will tell you that if you want to lose weight and build a great body, you should do as much exercise as possible, right? You should be doing HIIT training, you should go for runs, you should play sports, you should go on the elliptical. The truth is, intensive cardio is actually counterproductive for fat loss and building a great body. And that's for two reasons. First, it increases your appetite, which causes diet screw-ups, and it puts a dent in your recovery and takes away from the resources that you could put into your strength training, which is what you actually want to focus on when you're trying to build a great body. And so what I noticed when I used to do a lot of intense cardio forms in attempts to try and lose weight is that yes, I would burn some calories from going on runs, doing HIIT training, but oftentimes I would come back home and I would be really hungry as a result of those workouts. And I would often end up eating the calories back that I burned, and a lot of times more than that, because intensive cardio just really increases your appetite and causes you to almost want to binge eat. Obviously, when the goal is fat loss, the goal is to keep your appetite as low as possible so that eating in a calorie deficit is easy. And so if you're doing activity that counteracts that, that's not going to help you, right? And so the other thing to consider is that When you're in a calorie deficit, you're in an energy deficit, which means that you do not have a surplus of energy to allocate towards activity and towards adaptation. And so if you want to build a great body, you want to make sure that the limited resources you have available to you while you're in a calorie deficit go into your strength training, because the strength training is what's going to help you build and maintain muscle mass as you lean down, which is the goal if you actually want to look good. You don't just want to lose 20 pounds and have half of that be muscle mass. You want that to be pure body fat. The only way you're gonna be able to do that is by saving your resources and dumping all of them into your strength training. Always remember that the diet is gonna take care of the fat loss. The activity is not for the fat loss. It's like the only activity you really want to be doing and really allocating resources towards is your strength training, right? And that doesn't mean you just want to sit on your ass all day on your rest days. There is a form of cardio that I would recommend for fat loss, and that form of cardio is walking. And so walking basically gives you all the benefits of cardio without the downsides. And so since walking is low intensity by nature, it's not going to have the same effect on your appetite. So you can walk a ton and your appetite will be unaffected, right? And so that's very powerful, because walking is going to induce a further calorie deficit and help you burn more calories, but without increasing your appetite and causing you to screw up. So it will actually accelerate your fat loss. And the other thing is that since it's low intensity, it's not going to impede your recovery. And so if your recovery is not impeded, you're going to be able to take that and dump it to where it matters most, which is your strength training, right? And so I recommend, if you want to accelerate fat loss, get 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day. And if you really want to accelerate fat loss and lose fat as quick as possible, I'd recommend walking 12,000 to 15,000 steps per day. So now I want to give you a couple bonus tips to help you succeed in your fat loss journey. And the first one is kind of counterintuitive, but it's actually really important to be aware of, which is that you're going to be hungry sometimes. Deal with it, right? And so the thing that most people don't understand about fat loss is that your body is quite literally eating itself. It's not supposed to feel comfortable, right? And so if you feel hunger at times, you kind of have to push through it. And this is something that comes with experience. You have to know whether the hunger is like real hunger and you actually need food, or if it's just part of the process of losing the fat. Because as I said, your body's eating itself, you're gonna feel hungry at times. And telling yourself that you shouldn't feel hungry is not going to help you. You should understand that at times it's not going to be comfortable. And if you really wanna get very lean, you have to push through that hunger. This is dependent on where you are in your fat loss journey. If you're very overweight and you have a lot of energy reserves to tap into, you're not gonna be very hungry. And this is why, like, people who are very overweight, they can lose fat very quickly. They can be in a bigger calorie deficit. They're not even gonna get hungry at all. But if you're trying to strip off that last 10 to 15 pounds of body fat to get shredded, then yes, you're going to deal with hunger, right? And so if you're in a position where you're like ravenous one day and you feel like you're gonna binge eat if you don't eat something, then definitely eat something, right? There's a difference between like intense hunger and mild hunger. If it's intense hunger, you're better off bumping your calories up to maintenance for the day to avoid binge eating. Because I've had times where I would force myself to be in the calorie deficit despite feeling starving, and it would backfire. And then I would binge eat, and I'd basically eat way more calories than I would have if I had just stuck to maintenance. So if you feel intense hunger, just bump your calories up to maintenance for the day. It's gonna prevent you from binge eating. But if you just have mild hunger, sometimes you have to push through that if you want to get to the next level of leanness. My next tip is to stay busy. And so one of the biggest and simplest keys to getting lean is just to forget about food. And so if you're sitting around all day on the couch, close to the fridge, thinking about food, it's gonna be very difficult to get lean. And so when you're on a cut, when you're on a fat loss diet, you should be 10 times more productive than usual. You want to stay busy and occupy yourself with work, because then you're not gonna be thinking about food, right? And that's a very simple but powerful tip for accelerating fat loss and making sure that you don't overeat and screw up your diet. My next tip is to understand that fat loss is all about momentum. This is the most important thing to understand. Fat loss is very difficult at the beginning. When you're starting a diet, it's very, very difficult. You're gonna feel hungry. It's not gonna feel too good. You're gonna feel uncomfortable a lot of times. If you push through that initial inertia, if you stay disciplined for the first 3 weeks, you reach this period where you just lock in. You don't feel hungry. You wake up every day, you hit your calories, you hit your protein, and you're just locked in, focused on doing what you need to do, and your body is like riding a wave. It's not it's not hungry, you're not uncomfortable. It's very, very easy. But a lot of people fall off in that initial adjustment period where they're feeling a little bit hungry. But if you just push through that, then you reach this state of just like complete and utter focus, and it just becomes really easy. All you need to do is ride the wave, right? And so the analogy that I like to give, the metaphor, is that fat loss is like moving a stationary train that has a decline about 10 feet ahead, right? And so breaking a train free from its stationary physics is going to be very difficult, right? It's going to take a lot of energy. But once you get it moving and once it reaches that downward slope, it accelerates with ease. And that's exactly how fat loss works. You just have to push through that initial phase, then it becomes super easy and the train, so to speak, accelerates on its own. My next tip is to implement refeeds, but not traditional refeeds. And so refeeds are the concept where basically once a week, you bump your calories up to maintenance. And what that's supposed to do is sort of reset you a little bit. It's supposed to help you with your training performance, and basically just refeed you, help you increase your hormone levels and not be as hungry. But what I found through my experience is that eating at maintenance once a week doesn't really have a big effect. Like, it doesn't really do anything. I found that it's actually detrimental for fat loss progress because it screws up momentum. And so like I said before, fat loss is all about momentum. So when you lock into eating in the calorie deficit every single day, you want to just ride that wave for as long as possible. Take advantage of the fact that it's easy and that you're locked in and you've created momentum. But you still want to implement refeeds when they are needed. But the way that I do refeeds is that I do them every 1 to 2 months. And instead of eating at maintenance for one day, I eat at maintenance for an entire week. And that will do a much better job of helping you refeed and reset than just eating at maintenance once a week, right? And so some of the side effects you want to pay attention to that will tell you when it's time for a refeed is if you're always ravenous, like you're hungry every single day and you're really considering like screwing up your diet and you're thinking about binge eating and stuff like that. And then the other thing is when your performance in the gym starts to really decrease. So if you're losing muscle, if your strength is down, then that's also a really good sign that you need to refeed. The other thing is your hormones. If you feel like your sex drive is really low, then you probably need a refeed, right? And so instead of doing the once a week at maintenance, try and ride the wave for like 1 to 2 months and then take a week to eat at maintenance and then reset and then get back to it. My next tip is to understand that screw ups are inevitable. One thing that fucked me up for a long time was that whenever I would screw up my diet, I would feel an insane amount of guilt and it would cause me to screw up my diet even more. So if I hit my maintenance calories for a day or if I went over a little bit, I'd feel this tremendous guilt and then I would basically tell myself like, oh, you already screwed up your diet, you might as well just screw it up even more. You might as well enjoy this and take advantage while you're already here. And that was a very negative mindset that I had towards my diet and my relationship with food for a long time, right? So the best thing to do is to understand, like if this is a lifestyle, if this is something you're in for the long haul and this isn't just a quick fix, this is part of life. Like screw ups are going to be a part of the process. And the worst thing is to feel guilty about it because that guilt is going to cause you to want to screw up even more. And this is how people develop eating disorders. And that's something I was dealing with for a long time was binge eating, right? Because whenever I'd screw up, I would tell myself, you know, like you might as well just take advantage of this. And that's just not a healthy mindset to have with food. So the best thing to tell yourself is that, hey, like this is okay. Like eating at maintenance for a day or even going over, it's not going to set me back. All I need to do is just get back on track the next day. Just get back on track the next day. That's it, right? What I would also recommend is that if you are feeling like you need to screw up your diet or you need to eat more one day, change your mindset to thinking that hitting maintenance is a win. So that's something that I never really understood up until recently. Whenever I hit maintenance, I was like, oh, I'm not in a deficit, so I screwed up my diet, I might as well just keep going. But hitting maintenance is actually a win. And so don't be afraid some days if you're really hungry, if you feel like you need more food or you just want to enjoy yourself a little bit more, just hit maintenance and be happy with that, right? Don't tell yourself like, oh, I fucked up, I'm a failure, now I need to eat more food and binge eat, right? Just be okay with hitting maintenance and understand that if you're in this for the long haul and this is a lifestyle you want to live, then screw ups are just a part of the process.